The great chamber of the galactic conclave stretched for miles in every direction. Floating platforms held representatives from 412 species, each one ancient beyond human understanding. Some were made of living crystal, others were clouds of intelligent gas. A few looked like nightmares given form, all teeth and claws and eyes that saw in spectrums no human could imagine. High Arbiter Oran stood at the center of it all. His body was pure crystal, grown over 6,000 years of careful meditation. Light passed through him and split into rainbows that danced across the chamber walls. He had presided over galactic law since before humanity learned to make fire. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched stars die. Today, he would sentence a species to death. "The matter before us is simple," Oran said. His voice rang like bells through the vast space. "The humans of Earth have reached the stars. Their colony ships approach our borders. We must decide what to do with them." On a small platform near the back of the chamber, Ambassador stood alone. She was 63 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. She had spent 30 years trying to prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars. 30 years of smiling at creatures that looked at her like she was an insect. 30 years of begging for scraps of respect. She already knew how this vote would go. "The evidence is clear," continued a being called the representative of the collective, was a hive creature, a mass of smaller organisms that moved and thought as one. "Humans are dangerous beyond measure. Look at their history." A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. Images of Earth flickered past. Wars, bombs, mushroom clouds rising over cities, mass graves, burning forests, plastic choking the oceans. "They nearly destroyed their own world," said. "Not once, not twice, dozens of times. They kill each other over ideas, over land, over nothing at all. They are a disease that will spread across the galaxy if we do not stop them now." Wanted to speak. She wanted to explain that those images were not the whole story. She wanted to tell them about the doctors who ran into danger to save strangers, the firefighters who climbed burning towers, the soldiers who threw themselves on grenades so their friends could live. She wanted to tell them about art and music and love and sacrifice. But she had tried that before. They never listened. "I call for a vote," Oran announced. "All in favor of classifying humanity as a Class 7 existential threat and authorizing immediate extermination, indicate now." The lights began to change. Each platform glowed red for yes or blue for no. Watched as red spread across the chamber like blood in water. Red, 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 more red than she could count. A few platforms stayed blue. Species who had traded with human merchants. Species who had met human explorers and found them curious rather than threatening. But they were so few, so very few. "The vote is concluded," Oran said. 398 in favor, 14 opposed. "The proclamation of extermination is hereby passed. All military forces of the hegemony are authorized to engage human vessels on site. All human colonies are designated valid military targets. The species known as Homo is sentenced to death." The chamber erupted in what passed for applause among 400 species, clicking and humming and vibrations that shook the walls. They were celebrating. They thought they had won. Stood perfectly still on her platform. Around her, holographic representatives began to blink out as they disconnected from the session. Soon, the vast chamber was nearly empty. Just and the fatting echoes of her species' death sentence. Oran remained. He floated toward her platform, his crystal body catching the dim light. "You may return to your people," he said. "We will give you 1 standard month to prepare. It is a mercy." Looked up at him. She was so small compared to his towering form, so fragile, so human. And then she smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had seen something that others had missed. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret. "You have no idea what you've just done," she said. Oran's crystal form flickered with confusion. "We have done what must be done. Your species is too dangerous to live." "No," said. "You don't understand. We were trying. We were trying so hard to be peaceful. We knew what we were. We knew what we could become if we let ourselves, so we held back. We smiled when you insulted us. We accepted scraps when we could have taken everything. We played nice." She stepped closer to him. Her eyes were bright with something that made the ancient arbiter feel very uncomfortable. "You just told 8 billion people that their children are going to die. You just declared war on a species that spent 100,000 years fighting itself. You just picked a fight with the greatest predators the universe has ever produced." "You are small," Oran said, but his voice wavered. "You are young, you are." "We are what survived," interrupted. "Ice ages couldn't kill us, plagues couldn't kill us, predators couldn't kill us. We couldn't even kill ourselves, though God knows we tried, and now you want to try." She turned and walked toward her transport. At the door, she paused and looked back. "We were trying to be better," she said. "We really were, but you just made it very easy to stop trying." Then she was gone. Oran floated alone in the empty chamber. For the first time in 6,000 years, he felt something strange, something cold in his crystal heart. He did not know the human word for it. The word was fear. 12 hours later, his message reached Earth. It arrived during an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in North America. People were eating lunch. Children were in school. The world was going about its business, unaware that it had just been sentenced to extinction. Within 1 hour, every government on Earth had received the full recording. Within 2 hours, emergency sessions were called in every capital. Within 3 hours, old enemies were on the phone with each other, setting aside decades of hate. Within 6 hours, something happened that had never happened before in all of human history. The entire species spoke with one voice. Not a voice of fear, not a voice of despair, not even a voice of anger, though anger was certainly there. It was a voice of absolute, terrifying unity. "You want a war?" humanity asked the cosmos. "Fine, let us show you how it's done." In military bases around the world, soldiers who had been preparing for retirement started checking their weapons. In laboratories, scientists who had been working on medicine started working on something else. In factories, production lines that had been making cars started making ships. Humanity had spent centuries trying to become better, trying to leave behind the violence that had defined their history, trying to be worthy of the stars. The galaxy had just told them not to bother. And somewhere deep in the human heart, in a place that civilization had tried to bury, something ancient woke up. Something that had hunted mammoths across frozen plains. Something that had survived everything the universe had thrown at it. Something that was very, very good at war. The cosmos had poked the sleeping predator. Now it would learn why that was a mistake. War Predictor 7 was the most advanced military computer in the hegemony. It had calculated the outcomes of 10,000 conflicts. It had never been wrong. Now it sat in a chamber deep beneath the processing data on humanity. The more it learned, the more it wanted to stop learning. Commander stood before the great machine, waiting for its analysis. He was a tall and thin with gray skin and 4 arms. His species had achieved 80,000 years ago. They had never fought a war. Violence was something they read about in history files, a primitive behavior that civilized species had evolved past. "Analysis complete," War Predictor 7 announced. Its voice was cold and mechanical. "Human threat assessment revised." Revised frowned. "From what to what?" "Previous assessment, minimal threat. Standard primitive species. Technological capability approximately 300 years behind hegemony average. Recommend overwhelming force. Estimated time to victory, 6 standard months." And the revised assessment. The machine was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, Its voice seemed almost hesitant. Revised assessment, extreme threat. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. Felt cold, explain. I will show you what I found. The chamber filled with holographic images. Earth, spinning blue and green and beautiful. Then the images began to change. Humans evolved on a death world, War Predictor 7 said. Their planet is covered with predators, poisons, diseases, and natural disasters. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, ice ages, mass extinctions. By all calculations, intelligent life should never have survived there. Images of prehistoric Earth appeared. Giant predators with teeth longer than swords, frozen wastelands, burning deserts, poisonous forests. But humans survived. Do you know how? Shook his head. They adapted. Their bodies can function in temperatures ranging from -50 to +50 degrees. They can survive the loss of limbs, organs, even parts of their brain. They heal from wounds that would kill any hegemony species. They can eat almost anything organic. They can drink alcohol, a substance that is literally poison. More images appeared. Humans climbing mountains, humans swimming frozen rivers, humans running for days across endless plains. Their primary hunting strategy was something called persistence predation. They would choose a target and follow it, not fast, just steady, hour after hour, day after day. They would walk after their prey until the prey literally collapsed from exhaustion. Nothing could escape them. They simply never stopped. Felt sick, they hunted by refusing to quit. Yes, and they applied this strategy to everything. Problems, obstacles, enemies. Humans do not give up. It is not in their nature. When faced with impossible odds, they do not calculate probability of success. They simply keep trying until they succeed or die. The images changed again. Now they showed human history, battles, sieges, wars that lasted decades. I analyzed their military history, the machine continued. It is extensive. Humans have been fighting each other for their entire existence. They have developed strategies and tactics for every possible situation. They have invented weapons specifically designed to kill other humans, which means those weapons are extremely effective against beings with similar physical properties. A human soldier appeared on screen, small, fragile-looking, nothing compared to the armored war forms of the or the massive battle cruisers of the. Do not be fooled by their appearance, War Predictor 7 warned. Humans are among the most dangerous organisms in the known galaxy. Their reaction speed is exceptional. Their pain tolerance is extreme. They can continue fighting with injuries that would render any hegemony soldier unconscious. Stared at the small human figure. But we have superior technology, superior numbers we have. You have never fought a real war, the machine interrupted. None of the hegemony species have. The last major conflict in this region of space was 40,000 years ago, and it was resolved through negotiation. Humans have been fighting continuously for their entire history. They have forgotten more about warfare than the hegemony has ever known. The display changed to show human ships. They looked crude compared to hegemony vessels, blocky, functional, ugly. Their technology is behind ours, said, trying to find hope. Technology can be captured, technology can be improved. The machine's voice dropped lower. I found something in their classified files, something that changes everything. What? They knew about us. They have known for 200 years. Felt his foreheart stop. That's impossible. We were careful. Our observation drones were undetectable. They detected them anyway. They captured 3 drones over the past century. They reverse-engineered the technology. They studied our transmissions. They learned our languages. The machine paused. They have been preparing. Images appeared of secret human facilities, underground bunkers, hidden shipyards, weapons that the hegemony had never seen before. They knew this day would come. They hoped it wouldn't, but they prepared anyway. The ships we've seen are their civilian fleet, their merchant vessels, their exploration craft. The machine's voice was heavy with something that might have been fear. Their military fleet has never been deployed. We don't know its full size. We don't know its full capabilities. We know nothing. Stumbled backward. How is this possible? How could a primitive species? They are not primitive. They are young. There is a difference. War Predictor 7's display showed a final image, a human looking directly at the camera, just an ordinary human with ordinary eyes, but something in that gaze made want to run. The hegemony made an error, the machine said. It assumed that technological advancement equals danger. It calculated threat level based on weapons and ships and territorial holdings. It never considered what the humans call spirit. It never measured their will. It never understood what makes them truly dangerous. And what is that? They are survivors. Every human alive today is descended from an unbroken chain of survivors stretching back millions of years. Their ancestors survived predators, disease, ice, fire, famine, war, each other. Their entire evolutionary history has been one long test of survival, and they passed every time. The machine went silent. Then it spoke again, and its voice was the closest thing to afraid that had ever heard from an artificial intelligence. I recommend immediate surrender, open negotiations while it is still possible, apologize, beg if necessary, do whatever is required to end this conflict before it truly begins. The High Council will never accept that. We voted for extermination. We cannot. Then the hegemony will fall. War Predictor 7's voice was flat, final. I have calculated 1 million possible outcomes. In none of them does the hegemony win this war. The variables are clear. The math is simple. Then what happens? What did you calculate? The machine took a long moment to respond. Best case scenario. Humanity shows mercy. They defeat us and allow us to survive as a diminished power. This outcome has a probability of approximately 23%. And worst case? Another long pause. Worst case, humanity decides that the only way to be safe is to eliminate all threats permanently. They do to us what we tried to do to them. They have the capability. They have the motivation. They have the historical precedent. War Predictor 7's display went dark. I do not wish to calculate that outcome in detail. I have requested to be shut down rather than process the full implications. Request. I am now operating under protest. Stood alone in the darkness. He had come here expecting good news, expecting confirmation that the war would be short and easy, expecting to hear that the primitive humans would fall quickly before hegemony might. Instead, he had learned the truth. The hegemony had not sentenced humanity to death. The hegemony had sentenced itself. And somewhere across the void of space, 8 billion humans were preparing to deliver that sentence personally. Fleet Commander had served the Navy for 300 years. He had never seen actual combat because there had been no actual combat in his lifetime. War was something that happened in simulations, something that happened on screens. Now he stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his fleet die. It had started well enough. His force of 300 ships had entered the human colony system expecting easy victory. Intelligence reports said the colony had only 50,000 humans, a small settlement, barely defended. It should have been simple. That was 4 hours ago. Commander, his tactical officer's voice was high with panic. Another group of enemy ships approaching from the asteroid belt. Stared at his display in disbelief. The humans had hidden ships among the asteroids. They had powered down their systems and waited in silence for days, maybe weeks, floating in the cold darkness like dead things. Then, when the fleet committed to attack, they had come alive all at once. It was a trap, an obvious trap that had walked right into. How many ships? He demanded. 40 small craft fighter class. We still outnumber them, Focus fire on. The first human ship reached his fleet. Had expected the humans to use standard tactics, approach at safe distance, exchange fire, probe for weaknesses. That was how civilized species fought. The human pilot flew directly into the formation at speeds that should have been impossible to control. He weaved between capital ships like he was dancing. His weapons never stopped firing. In 30 seconds, he had disabled 2 cruisers and destroyed a supply vessel. Then he did something that made crystalline blood freeze. His ship was damaged, engines failing, weapons offline. Any sane pilot would eject. Any rational being would surrender. The human pilot aimed his dying ship at its command carrier and pushed his engines to full burn. Evasive action screamed. The carrier was too large, too slow. It couldn't dodge in time. The human ship slammed into the hull at 3,000 kilometers per hour, punching through armor like paper, detonating in a ball of fire that killed 300 crew members. One pilot, one small ship, one act of suicidal determination. And that was just the beginning. On the planet's surface, things were even worse. Ground troops had landed expecting frightened civilians. What they found was something else entirely. Sergeant Orr led his squad through the human settlement. The streets were empty. The buildings were dark. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. "Where are they?" one of his soldiers whispered. Intelligence said 50,000. A shot rang out. The soldier dropped. A hole burned through his armored chest. Or spun, trying to find the source. There was nothing, just empty buildings and silent streets. Another shot, another soldier down. Return fire, or ordered, fire at. At what? He couldn't see anything. The humans were invisible, hidden in shadows and behind walls and under rubble. They struck and vanished like ghosts. Or finally spotted one. A human female, crouched behind a destroyed vehicle. She was old by human standards, her hair gray, her face lined. She held a weapon that looked like it had been made from farming equipment. A civilian, an elderly civilian with a homemade gun. He raised his weapon to fire, but she was faster. The shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He fell, and through his pain he saw her stand and walk toward him without fear. "You came to kill our children," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, terrifying. "Did you think we would let you?" She raised her weapon again. Or survived only because his squad's medic dragged him away. They retreated from the colony with less than half their original number. Behind them, the elderly woman returned to her position and waited for more enemies. She had been a teacher before the war. She had never held a weapon in her life until 3 weeks ago. Now she had killed 9 soldiers and showed no signs of stopping. This pattern repeated across every engagement. The humans refused to fight fairly. They refused to fight by any rules the hegemony recognized. They hid in places no sane being would hide. They attacked from directions that made no tactical sense. They used weapons that ranged from cutting-edge military technology to sharpened pieces of metal tied to sticks. And they would not break. In one battle, a human squad held a bridge for 16 hours against 200 soldiers. They ran out of ammunition after 4 hours. They fought with knives, then with rocks, then with their bare hands. When reinforcements finally arrived, only 2 humans were still alive, but the bridge was still held. In another engagement, a human pilot whose ship was destroyed managed to crash land on a carrier. He climbed out of his burning wreckage, walked to the bridge, and killed the entire command crew before anyone understood what was happening. When security forces finally cornered him, he was laughing. "Worth it," he said as they shot him down. "Completely worth it." The hegemony commanders couldn't understand. Their troops were better equipped, better trained, more numerous. By every logical measure, they should have been winning. But humans didn't fight logical wars. Fleet Admiral Way stood on the bridge of the UNS Persistence, watching the battle reports come in. The hegemony thought they were winning because they were taking territory. They didn't understand that territory meant nothing to humans. What mattered was making the enemy bleed. "Status report," she ordered. "Hegemony losses are at 43%, her tactical officer replied. "They've lost over 4,000 ships and approximately 2 million ground troops. And our losses? 12%, 230 ships, 15,000 personnel." The admiral nodded. The numbers were acceptable, better than acceptable actually. The humans had been fighting with their reserve forces while their main fleet remained hidden. They had been testing the enemy, learning their tactics, finding their weaknesses. Now they knew. "Send a message to all commands," Admiral said. "The testing phase is over. Begin Phase 2. Her tactical officer looked up. "Phase 2, Admiral, are you sure?" "The hegemony voted to exterminate us. They wanted to murder our children, our elderly, everyone we love." The Admiral's voice was cold as space. "It's time to show them what that decision costs." Across human space, hidden bases came to life. Shipyards that had been dark for decades powered up their systems. Weapons that had never been fired were loaded and armed. Soldiers who had been training for this moment their entire lives received their orders. The sleeping predator opened its eyes. And the galaxy was about to learn why you never wake a sleeping predator. 3 months into the war, a hegemony admiral reviewed the casualty reports and wept. His species had not wept in 10,000 years. They had forgotten how. The humans taught them to remember. They also taught them something else, something the hegemony had never truly understood. There is a difference between a species that has evolved past violence and a species that has mastered violence so completely that it chooses when and how to use it. The hegemony was the first type. Humanity was the second. And that difference was going to cost the hegemony everything. 6 months after the proclamation of extermination, the galaxy had changed. The hegemony was dying, not slowly, like an old creature fading into sleep, but violently, like prey being torn apart by predators. Human fleets moved through their territory with terrible efficiency. Colony after colony fell. Station after station went dark. The greatest alliance in galactic history was collapsing like a before a rising tide. On the something impossible was happening. The collective was breaking. For 1 billion years there had been one mind. Trillions of individual organisms linked together in perfect unity. They thought together. They decided together. They moved together. The idea of disagreement was as foreign to them as breathing underwater. But now units were separating. Individuals were cutting themselves off from the rather than share in its growing terror. They looked at the losses. They felt the deaths of millions of their kind. They saw human soldiers who fought without hesitation, who died without fear, who kept coming no matter what the collective threw at them. And they felt something new, something that had no place in a unified consciousness. They felt alone. They felt afraid. They wanted to survive, even if survival meant abandoning the whole. The first defector reached human lines on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. She was small, barely the size of a human child. Her carapace was dull from stress. Her antennae trembled with fear. "I surrender," she said in broken English. "Please, I do not want to die, I do not want to fight, I just want to live." The human soldiers looked at each other. They had been told that there were monsters, mindless drones in service to an alien. They had expected to kill or be killed. They had not expected this trembling, terrified creature begging for mercy. "Lower your weapons," ordered Captain Stone. He knelt down to look in her many eyes. "You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." "You promise?" Her voice was so small, so scared. "I promise." That single act of mercy would echo across the galaxy. Within weeks, the story had spread to every hegemony world. The humans didn't kill prisoners. The humans didn't torture captives. The humans accepted surrenders. They could have been monsters. They had every right to be monsters after what the hegemony had tried to do to them. Instead, they chose to be something else. But that didn't mean they were soft. High Arbiter Orion, the ancient crystal being who had led the vote against humanity, was dead. His own species had killed him. They had watched their fleets burn and their soldiers die, and they had decided that someone needed to be blamed. Orion had stood before them for 6,000 years, guiding their decisions with wisdom and patience. Now his shattered remains lay in the ruins of his meditation chamber, destroyed by the people he had served. The empire collapsed 3 months in. Their government simply dissolved. Leaders resigned. Military commanders surrendered without firing a shot. Citizens took to the streets demanding peace at any price. They got their wish. Human representatives arrived at the not as conquerors but as negotiators. They offered terms. They would withdraw from the hegemony, share all intelligence on remaining hostile forces, and pay reparations to human colonies that had been attacked. In exchange, humanity would protect them. "Protect us?" the Prime asked in disbelief. "You would protect us after we voted to exterminate you?" "You made a mistake," said Admiral Wei, the human commander who had led the war from its first day. "Mistakes can be forgiven. What matters now is what you do next." They accepted. They had no choice, but they also felt something unexpected: gratitude, hope, maybe even the beginning of trust. Not all humans agreed with this approach. In fleet command meetings, in government chambers, in homes across human space, the debate raged. "They tried to kill us," shouted General at a war council on Earth. "All of them. They voted to murder our children, and now we're supposed to show them mercy." "Mercy isn't weakness," Admiral replied calmly. "It's strength. We've proven we can destroy them. Now we need to prove we can build something better. And if they try again, what then?" "Then we destroy them, but we give them the chance first. That's what makes us different from them." The vote was close. The decision was difficult, but in the end, humanity chose hope over revenge. They would offer peace. Real peace, not the peace of conquerors, but the peace of equals. Any species that surrendered, that apologized, that committed to a new way of doing things would be welcomed. Those that refused would face the full fury of human warfare. Most surrendered. One by one, species that had voted for humanity's extinction reached out for mercy. They sent diplomats. They offered treasures. They begged and pleaded and promised to change. And humanity accepted them, every time, without exception. "Why?" asked the diplomat during surrender negotiations. "We would have killed your entire species. Why would you spare us?" The human ambassador, a young man named David Park, thought about the question for a long time before answering. "Because someone has to be better," he finally said. "Someone has to break the cycle. If we destroy you, what does that make us? Just another empire built on bones. We've had enough of that in our own history. We want something new." "But how can you trust us? How can you know we won't betray you?" David smiled. It wasn't a threatening smile, but it wasn't entirely gentle either. "We don't trust you," he admitted. "Not yet. Trust has to be earned. What we're offering is a chance. Take it or don't. But understand this, we're giving you a choice that you never gave us. Remember that. And remember what happens if you make the wrong choice again." The diplomat looked at the young human, small, fragile, so brief in there, so quick to age and die, and yet somehow more dangerous than any species the galaxy had ever known. "I will remember," he said. "My people will remember." "Good, then let's build something worth remembering." The war was ending, not with the total annihilation that the hegemony had planned for humanity, but with something more complicated. A surrender that felt like salvation, a victory that felt like hope. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Persistence as it entered the home system. The planet hung before her, beautiful and blue, home to billions of beings who had voted to murder her species. She could destroy it. She had the power. She had the right, by any measure of justice that the galaxy recognized. Her weapons could glass every city, boil every ocean, turn this world into a dead rock orbiting an indifferent star. Instead, she opened a channel and broadcast to the entire planet. This is Admiral Way of the United Nations Navy. We are not here to destroy you. We are not here to conquer you. We are here to show you that we chose not to. Remember that. Remember who we are. Remember who we chose to be. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. The war is over. Let's see what comes next. Below her, on a world that had been saved by the mercy of its enemies, billions of looked up at the human ships in their sky and felt something they had never expected to feel. Not fear, not hatred, not relief. They felt shame. And in that shame was the seed of something new, something that might, with time and care and effort, grow into understanding. The hunt had reversed. The predator had become the peacemaker. But the predator was still there, behind those kind words and gentle gestures. The galaxy had seen what humans could do when pushed. It would not forget. That was exactly what humanity intended. 1 year after the proclamation of extermination, the galaxy gathered again. The great chamber on Nexus Prime was full, just as it had been before. Floating platforms held representatives from hundreds of species, their forms ranging from crystalline to gaseous to things that human eyes could barely process. Light danced through the vast space, reflecting off alien bodies and artificial surfaces. But everything had changed. The hegemony was gone. In its place stood something new, the Galactic Union. Not an alliance of ancient powers looking down on younger species, but a true partnership of equals. Every world had a voice. Every species had rights. Every being mattered. And at the center of it all, on a platform that had once held only, stood a human delegation of 12. Ambassador was among them, her gray hair now white, her tired eyes now filled with something like peace. She had spent her life fighting for humanity's place in the cosmos. Now she was helping to build that cosmos anew. The first session of the Galactic Union is hereby called to order, she announced. Her voice carried through the chamber, strong and clear. We are here not as conquerors and conquered, not as predators and prey, but as partners. We are here to build something that has never existed before, a true community of worlds. Across the chamber, representatives who had once voted for humanity's death listened in silence. Some felt shame, some felt fear, some felt the first stirrings of hope. 1 year ago, you declared war on humanity, continued. You thought you were eliminating a threat. You thought you were protecting yourselves from a dangerous young species that might one day challenge your power. She paused, letting the memory settle over the chamber. You were right about one thing. We are dangerous. We are the most dangerous species this galaxy has ever known. We have fought ourselves for 100,000 years. We have killed billions of our own kind. We have invented weapons capable of destroying worlds, and we have come terrifyingly close to using them. The silence in the chamber was absolute, every being hung on her words. But you were wrong about what that danger means. You saw our violence and assumed it was all we were. You saw our wars and assumed we could never have peace. You looked at our history and saw only death. Her voice softened. You didn't see the rest. She gestured, and holographic images appeared throughout the chamber. Not images of war this time, but something else entirely. A human doctor working through the night to save a stranger's life. A human firefighter running into a burning building when everyone else was running out. A human mother shielding her children from danger with her own body. Scientists spending decades trying to cure diseases. Artists creating beauty in the darkest times. Teachers passing knowledge to the next generation with patience and love. Humans holding hands with aliens on a dozen worlds, building friendships that had seemed impossible just a year before. We are all of this, said. The violence and the mercy, The war and the peace, the destruction and the creation. We contain everything and we choose what we become. She stepped forward to the edge of her platform. 1 year ago we chose. You gave us every reason to choose vengeance. You gave us every excuse to become the monsters you feared. Instead, we chose to be better. Not because we are weak, not because we couldn't destroy you, but because we didn't want to, because we've had enough of destruction, because we want to see what we can build instead. A young child watched from a viewing gallery high above the chamber floor. She had never seen a human before the war. Now she saw them every day. They lived in her city, worked in her schools, shared meals with her family. At first she had been afraid. Her parents had told her stories about the terrible humans, the predators who had nearly destroyed everything. But the humans she met weren't terrible. They were kind. They laughed easily. They asked questions about her life and actually listened to the answers. One human in particular had become her friend. A man named James, old by human standards, with scars on his hands and a gentle voice. He had been a soldier in the war. He had killed, he never it. But when she asked him why he was here, living among the species he had fought, he gave her an answer she never forgot. Because healing starts with presence, he said. We hurt you. We can't take that back, but we can be here now. We can show you who we are when we're not fighting for our lives. We can help you rebuild. But why do you care about us? James had smiled, a sad and tired smile. Because if we didn't care, what was all that fighting for? We survived because we refused to give up. But survival isn't enough. Life has to mean something. It has to be about more than just not dying. He had looked at her with eyes that had seen terrible things and chosen to see hope instead. You're the future, he told her. All of you, every child on every world in this new union. We're going to make sure you grow up in a galaxy where nobody has to fight like we did, where nobody has to vote on whether a species deserves to exist, where everyone matters. Is that possible? She asked. I don't know, James admitted, but we're going to try, and humans are very good at trying. In the great chamber below, Ambassador was finishing her address. The Galactic Union is built on simple principles, she said. Every species has the right to exist. Every species has the right to grow. Every species has the right to choose its own path. And if anyone threatens those rights, they will face all of us together. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings who had once wanted her dead. We are not your masters. We are not your judges. We are your partners, your neighbors, your friends if you'll let us be. We've shown you what we can do when we're threatened. Now let us show you what we can do when we're building, when we're dreaming, when we're reaching for something beyond ourselves. Her voice grew stronger. The old galaxy is dead. The hegemony is gone. The future is unwritten. We get to decide together what comes next, not through war but through cooperation, not through fear but through trust, not through domination but through partnership. She raised her hand, and across the chamber, representatives of 1,000 species raised theirs in answer. Today, we begin again, not as we were but as we choose to be, stronger together than any of us were alone, better together than any of us could be apart. Ambassador smiled, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, it was a smile without weight, without fear, without the burden of proving that her species deserved to exist. Welcome to the future. Let's make it worth living. The chamber erupted, not in the clicking applause of celebration, but in something deeper, a sound of unity, a sound of hope, a sound that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Far beyond the chamber, beyond Nexus Prime, beyond the borders of the new Galactic Union, other beings watched. Ancient powers who had stayed hidden during the war. Intelligences older than stars, who had watched the hegemony rise and fall with distant curiosity. Now they watched humanity with new eyes. These small creatures, these brief lives that burned so hot and faded so fast, had done something unprecedented. They had been given every reason to destroy, and they had chosen to build instead. They had been threatened with extinction, and they had responded with mercy. They were still dangerous, perhaps more dangerous than ever, because now the galaxy loved them instead of fearing them. Now species that had wanted them dead would die to protect them. But that danger was tempered by something else, something that the ancient Watchers had rarely seen in the long history of the cosmos. Wisdom, not the wisdom of age, but the wisdom of experience. The wisdom of a species that had learned from its own mistakes, that had looked at its worst impulses and chosen to be better. Humanity had arrived, not as conquerors, not as saviors, not as the monsters they had every right to become. They had arrived as builders, dreamers, partners. And the universe, watching, decided to give them a chance. After all, they had earned it. In the viewing gallery, the young child looked down at the celebrating chamber. Somewhere in that crowd was James, the human soldier who had become her friend. Somewhere down there was a future she had never imagined possible. She touched the crystal pendant around her neck, a gift from her human neighbors, and smiled. The war was over. The healing had begun. And somewhere, in the vast darkness between stars, the cosmos whispered a truth that humanity had always known. The deadliest species in the galaxy was also the one most capable of love. And that made all the difference.